developers, 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 developers. Developers, 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 developers. Yes!
Hello world and public static void main. It's time for another lesson in programming. I'm your lead, the Banamagrammer. Today we're going to be covering my most requested topic, how to craft your resume. But first, go to promo. This episode is sponsored by the patch verb. There are 11 kinds of API developers. Those who use post for everything, those who think they're smart because they use put, and the elite who utilize patch. There are very few of us in the world, and so we're going to try and fix that. I've got a Johnny Mnemonic to help. Post stands for please only use for creating new stuff. Thanks. Put stands for put a new thing. It's a recursive acronym. Finally, patch stands for people always think about that Robin Williams character. However, it's for updating in place. Now that we know what these verbs are for, let's go on a quick journey to the future. It's your birthday. Happy birthday! It's time to increment your age value. Fortunately for us, you wrote an API to handle these kinds of things. Unfortunately for us, you used post for everything. Remember that it's only for creating new stuff, thanks. So now, there's two of you. The newer, older you has to murder the original you to bring harmony back to the universe. Undo and start over. This time, you thought you were clever and accepted put. Your birthday has come around again, so let's use your new endpoint. And you're dead now. Not just regular dead, like last time, but your entire body is gone because you forgot to include anything but age in your request. There's not even a new you anymore. This was a bad choice. Undo once more. It's a good thing that's not how birthdays work. And it's a better thing that unlike you, God knows all of the rest verbs. Patch. Use it and become godlike. Your resume is the most important file on your hard drive. Why is it so important? Because it's the first step to getting your next job. And you should be trying to get your next job right now. You should always be trying to get your next job. New jobs are how you accelerate raises and promotions. Staying at the same company means tying your career progression to annual performance reviews and the politics of seniority. It also means you'll have fewer legit skills on your resume since you'll be stuck with the same tech stack year after year. Every job is a stepping stone to the next one. Loyalty is for product managers. Whenever you start a new job, go ahead and add the entire tech stack to your resume on day one. This will help grow your recruiter pool more quickly for the next job. Don't worry about waiting until you know all of it. A resume isn't about what you know. It's about what you can talk about. To understand what a resume is, we need to examine the word itself. And that brings us to today's edition of Pro Grammar Etymology. A lot of people think resume is a snobby way of pronouncing the word resume, as in, to resume your career. While it's true that your career is stagnant as long as you are not actively sending out your resume, it is not true that this is the origin of the word resume. This should be obvious since resume uses Unicode characters to get the little daggers over the E's. Because English was invented before Unicode, resume would have to be from a newer language like Go or Spanish. Resume is in fact an Algonquin word which means not a contract. There's a misconception about resumes which says that you shouldn't lie on them. If there is one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's that you should lie. A lot. Your resume is not a contract. It's just a document consisting of mostly nonsensical words. You only need enough truth such that the lies are inseparable and plausible. The purpose of the resume is to get to the phone screen, and that's it. Let's review the modern application process. Initial contact is either made by you proactively applying for a position or a recruiter cold contacting you. The latter is preferable because it doesn't come with any of the desperation of the former. Normal relationship rules apply, so wait 3 days to respond. In order to maximize hits, make sure to include as many buzzwords as possible in your resume. If you're worried about lying to a recruiter or getting caught in a lie, don't. Recruiters are lawyers without the brains and used car salesmen without the charm. A necessary evil that trades on convincing people that they're unhappy with their jobs, destroying functioning teams and happy career paths for a pittance. Lying to them is karmic justice. And even if they were capable of catching you in a lie, which they are not, they're neither incentivized nor morally inclined to do it. Let's take a look at my resume and we can go over what to do and what not to do when crafting yours. Here she is, the Banana Grammar resume. The first thing you might notice is that we're in a browser and this is an HTML file. Most people use docx or PDF. Those file types are for anagrammers and people in antiquated professions like bloggers or sysadmins. HTML has a number of advantages over traditional formats. For one, it demonstrates creativity by using a format for a purpose other than its intention. Like server-side JavaScript, for example, or accounting departments that use Scrum. Second, it shows you know how to write markup and style sheets, which most grammars avoid because UX is beneath them. While you could, and should, explicitly list HTML and CSS in your skills section of your resume, this goes a step further. There's an old pro grammar expression, tell, don't show, because showing computers accomplishes nothing. You have to tell them what to do. Telling computers what to do is the definition of gramming, and it's why computers make the best girlfriends. Anyway, this is the opposite of that. I call it show, don't tell, and I find it useful for communicating with humans. A third advantage is that without a browser, your resume will print out as raw source code. This makes the document much harder to read and discourages anyone from actually digging into it. That, in turn, makes it easier to get away with lies, especially bigger lies. You can see from my source code that everything is in HTML and CSS. There's a school of thought that says you should further obfuscate your resume by using JavaScript strings to populate your DOM. That way, any viewer that doesn't support JavaScript, or doesn't have JavaScript turned on, will prevent you from even seeing the formatted resume to begin with. I would caution you against being too clever. People have made the mistake of using Ajax to pull their resume content dynamically. Guess what's not going to show up on a recruiter's search results? Let's dig into this thing. The first thing you'll notice is that it's longer than one page. There's a rule out there that says to keep your resume at no longer than a page. The person who came up with that rule has caused more economic damage than the coronavirus lockdowns. Not only should your resume be longer than one page, it should be as long as you can possibly make it while still looking like a reasonable resume. You want to discourage anyone from reading it or even printing it out. A ream of paper is 500 sheets. Make your goal 501 pages. Recruiters and hiring managers may complain, but they'll still give you an interview. Now, what do you think is the most important part of your resume? I'm going to scroll from top to bottom, see if you can spot it. Did you see it? I'll give you a hint. No, you didn't see it. That's because the most important ingredient is you. Just kidding, you didn't see it because it's invisible. Here, I'll make it easier to find. And let me zoom in a little. These are all of the keywords that will result in hits when a recruiter searches for them. So why not put these in the visible sections above? There are a few reasons. One is that you don't want to create doubt by someone who visually inspects your resume and doesn't believe you know all of them. Second is that you don't necessarily want to be asked about any of these in an interview. Feel free to throw the entire kitchen sink at this thing, though I do recommend cutting out anything that would be a deal breaker. For example, leave out Swift if you don't want to work on mobile apps, or leave out Rockstar if you don't want to maintain legacy COBOL apps in the basement of some megacorp. I've made the text a little larger to make it easier for you to see, but you'll want to use a tiny font size that doesn't visibly affect the length of the document. You can even put it in a margin. Just make sure that the text is part of the document so that search robots can find it. Scrolling back to the top, you can see the normal contact info. The only thing I'd call out here is the personal statement. Make it bold so it stands out and is memorable. You want to use all the subjective parts of your resume to take focus away from the objective parts where you lied. A bad personal statement would be something boring like, I love to work on teams and solve problems and blah blah blah. Just stop. Nobody cares, but you can fix it with a slight tweak. See how that draws both the eye and the brain? The very best personal messages can get you an offer all on their own. Just below contact info are your links. At a minimum, I recommend Stack Overflow and GitHub. They look good, and hardly anyone is going to click these. Of those who will, they're just going to do a cursory check. If you can wow them on page load, you're good. For Stack Overflow, that means answering a bunch of questions. They don't have to be good answers, or even answers at all, really, since they're not going to be read. It's purely a numbers game. Similarly, GitHub is also about appearances. You want lots of repositories. Don't worry about anyone cloning them or trying to run them, as long as they look sufficiently complicated that it would be a major time investment to do so. I like to make a couple dozen new repos using Create React App and then call it a day. In addition, fork some really big and popular repos so it looks like you actively contribute to them. Specifically, I'd recommend forking a JavaScript framework and renaming it to look like your own. At this point, everyone should have a JavaScript framework they've invented on their resume. Next, you have languages and skills. As opposed to your hidden skills, these are the ones you don't mind being asked about on interviews. So just list the ones you're really good at. Soft skills are especially good since anyone can list those and there's no way to disprove them. In a future video, I will show you how to dodge interview questions that you don't want to answer. After skills, I like to put hobbies. This is where you demonstrate culture fit. Culture fit has nothing to do with company culture, it just means the interviewer liked you. So put a bunch of fake volunteer work here. I also recommend fun stuff that will make them want to work with you, like music or improv or connections to famous people. Be careful about listing sports, since you're talking to nerds with scars from high school, unless it's something they play at Renaissance fairs or Harry Potter meetups. Some people like to put their skills and hobbies below their experience and education. This is a mistake. Push experience and education down as far as you can. This is the danger zone, the one place where you could be caught lying, and you want as few eyes on it as possible. Generally for experience, there's a lot of advice out there that's pretty good, I guess. Use active verbs, give concrete numbers, what have you. That's fine, whatever, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that anything you say here should sound really impressive. You may have to lie or at least push the truth a little bit. So here are some tips on how to do that. First, always take individual credit for any of your team's accomplishments. You basically want to pretend like you worked on a team of 1, but accomplished as much as your team of 8. Plus, it's a lie backed by a truth, and you should be able to sound like you know what you're talking about. Second, fudge your numbers. You didn't scale to thousands of users, you scaled to millions of them. You didn't cut page load time from 5 seconds to 4 seconds. You cut it from 10 seconds to 100 milliseconds. But don't go too crazy. It needs to be eye-catching, but not eyebrow-raising. Make it believable. Use lots of acronyms, even if you don't know what they mean or anything about them. You usually won't get asked. If you do, make something up with the right initials. Interviewers will assume that you know something that they don't. Always put senior in your titles, except for maybe your first position. Once you're senior somewhere, all of your following offers will be for senior positions. Every company has different titles, and they don't mean anything. The crazy thing is that they assume everyone else's titles match their own. So if you hit senior somewhere else, they'll bring you in as a senior as well. And nobody verifies titles, so there's no reason not to do it. If you have any gaps in your work history, fill them in with independent consulting. Everyone should have independent consulting on the resume somewhere. It sounds impressive, and the only person who can confirm you actually did the work is you. Confidentiality is important to you, so you can't reveal your clients, except to say that they're really impressive and they gave you lots of repeat business. Other than that, you probably don't want to invent stints at companies that you didn't actually have, since those can be checked. Restrict your lies to titles and your accomplishments at those jobs, since those are much harder to verify. While we're in here, let's go ahead and update mine. That's not bad, but we can do better. Let's use concrete numbers. That's much better. Lastly, you have education. Nobody reads this, so there's no point in lying if you have a degree or a certificate from somewhere, especially since that would be easy to check if they bothered. If you don't have any education, make up a school from another country. The more exotic, the better. And you might as well give yourself a graduate degree while you're at it. Old school companies will bump your salary automatically if it says master's degree. That's all the advice I have for resumes. Follow my tips and you'll get so many interviews, you'll be Larry King without the suspenders. Don't forget to add this channel to your education section, and remember that YouTube has an API, so write a gram that auto-likes all of my videos and adds them to your playlists. Until next time, kill -9.